I'm here with Pastor. We are doing a Q&A session. Some of the questions you guys submit, some of the questions Pastor comes up with, I'll come up with, and then we just sit in here and we talk about them to help clarify these issues in your minds, to help strengthen us as we walk our Christian walk. So I'd like to thank you for joining us and taking the time out of your day. I thoroughly appreciate that.
I am enjoying this immensely. I'm grateful for the opportunity. The Puritans are an overlooked group of guys. Mm-hmm. Most people think they just didn't have any fun. You know, they sat around and if you grinned, they got mad at you or something.
Today we have question number 17. This is more of a personal question for you. So we have a lot of readers in our youth.
Good.
They enjoy reading. Yes, it is very good news. So what are your top books that you would recommend for us to read and that have impacted your life in a special way?
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm a bibliophile, so I love books. And it's really difficult to narrow the scope down to 3 or 4 or 5, but I'm going to try to do that. Let me mention several that have impacted me, and I actually recommend that our students would read as well. I think one of the top books that has both impacted my life and that I would recommend for you guys to read is Knowing God by J.I. Packer. I think it shows up, that book shows up on a list of books that's impacted the evangelical world the most in the last 50 years or whatever it is. I mean, it's always a book that shows up on the top list. The book talks about God, who God is, and what does it mean to know Him in such a way that it really exalts God. When you read that book, and I've told myself I need to read that book every few years, it just brings you back to God, and it brings you back to His greatness and the privilege and the honor that it is to know Him. J.I. Packer, Knowing God. Let me add to that, since I'm on Packer, another book he wrote, perhaps a little less known as that book, is The Quest for Godliness. Packer wrote that book really to reflect the Puritan life. Who were the Puritans? And what was the Christian life from a Puritan perspective? And it is just such a good... The Puritans are an overlooked group of guys. Most people think they just didn't have any fun. You know, they sat around and if you grinned, they got mad at you or something. And they really were not like that at all. And Packer did a good job about presenting the Puritans in their perception of the Christian life in a way that really challenges us in our Christian life. Quest for Godliness by J.I. Packer. Let me add to that A.W. Tozer's little book, The Pursuit of God. Now, by the way, let me make a marginal comment here. When I recommend a book, it doesn't mean I agree with everything in the book, and you guys need to know that. And when I recommend an author, it doesn't mean I agree with everything the author. Sometimes I don't even agree with myself, you know. So, I mean, Tozer, I don't think, was reformed like I would be reformed. But Tozer loved God. And he had a white-hot heart for God that I don't see in a lot of people today. And it's a little paperback, and it's still in print. You can get it. The Pursuit of God. And he's going to challenge you to run after God with all of your heart. And I find myself challenged in that little book. It's a book I read over and over and over as well. So A.W. Tozer, T-O-Z-E-R, Pursuit of God. I'm going to give you some biographies. Do your students like to read biographies?
I do.
One of my favorite writers of biographies is Ian Murray. Ian Murray, in fact, I would recommend any biography Ian Murray writes or wrote, but two that I'm going to suggest to you that have meant a lot to me personally. His biography on Charles Spurgeon. You would expect me to say something about Spurgeon. I've got another book on Spurgeon that I'm going to give you in just a moment. But Murray did a great job on Charles Spurgeon, and I recommend that book. The other biography that he wrote that I recommend to you is his biography on Martin Lloyd-Jones. Martin Lloyd-Jones is a guy you need to know about. Born in he started pastoring in 1939 till 1968 at Westminster in London. He was pastoring there when World War II was going on. In fact, there's a collection of sermons that he preached during World War II on suffering that I recommend to you. Martin Lloyd-Jones. And Martin is Martyn. Martin Lloyd-Jones. It's a hyphenated name, Lloyd-Jones. He's Welsh, was Welsh, and was one of the guys that got Banner of Truth started in the early days. Ian Murray's biography on Martin Lloyd-Jones is great because Murray was associate pastor under Martin Lloyd-Jones. Really? So he knew Martin Lloyd-Jones personally, and does a great job with Martin Lloyd-Jones. And while I'm on Lloyd-Jones, I'm going to recommend another book. And that is, I'm telling you this book because it's meant a lot to me. If you're not going to be a preacher, you may not want to read the book. But the book is entitled Preaching and Preachers by Martin Lloyd-Jones. And this book is a collection of lectures that he gave on preaching. And I need to say to you, that book has impacted my personal understanding of what preaching is more than any other book I've ever read. If any of you guys are going to be a preacher, if God calls you to preach, I am going to urge you to read Preaching and Preachers by Martin Lloyd-Jones. It will shape and fashion how you think about preaching. And then one other book, a book that I highly recommend to all of you, and that is a devotional book by Charles Spurgeon called Morning and Evening. My first copy was given to me when I was about 25 years old by a friend of mine. I was leaving Oklahoma and going to Indiana to take a pastorate there, and that book was given to me. And I have read those devotions, and they're devotions, a morning devotion and an evening devotion every day of the year. I can't tell you how many times I've gone through that book. My time with God is precious to me. I have learned so much, and God has worked on me in these moments I spend with Him day after day after day. And that little devotional has spoken to me in my time with God in such a way that it's been transformative in my life. Morning and Evening by Charles Spurgeon.
Thank you, Pastor.
You're welcome.